to the Phil Steele Plus Tour for October the 8th. Well, a nice 6-1 week for the colleges last week. I've got 8 more plays for you this week. And, a quick reminder to you, I'm a little disappointed. I put a lot of work and effort into these YouTube tapes. Spread the word, my friends. Spread the word. This is out there. I put all this information each week into these tapes absolutely free. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell. That way when it's updated, you'll be notified. And give me a like. So give me a like, hit the subscribe, hit the bell. I'd like to thank a couple of comments that we had on last week's. If we take a look here, we got Bob here. Very nice comment there. And also Craig Wood's been a Steel fan for the last 12 years. So I appreciate all that. But please spread the word. Let your friends know. And subscribe and hit the like. But let's get to today's video, and we're going to start out with the first of your 8 plays, and I'm going to give you one of my favorite handicapping philosophies, and it's called playing on a streak. I take it all the way back to the New England Patriots against the Chicago Bears in the Super Bowl. Coming into that game, I think the New England Patriots that year was week 5, week 6. The Patriots covered for me. I was putting out a football newsletter, and I covered as a 4-star selection. And I love to play streaks. So the next week I put New England out as a 4-star again. They covered. Put them out as a 4-star again the next week. They covered. They actually went on a 13-game spread streak. They got all the way to the Super Bowl. I'll admit it. I had New England in the Super Bowl, and they lost. It was an ugly loss. But you know what? I'll take 12-1 any day of the week, and I don't mind absorbing a loss like it was in the Super Bowl when the Bears waxed the Patriots. But the Patriots, I believe, won 13 in a row that year against the spread. So when you play on a streak, you can win many times, and guess what? You only lose once. And to give you a quick story, and this is a true story. This happened to me. I like to, during the off season, naturally I have no time during football. There's only football in my life during football. But during the off season, I do like to play roulette. And so I'm sitting at the roulette table, and a guy comes down and he goes, "Wow, 5 straight blacks. Red is due." And he plops $50 on red. And I said to him, I go, when you play on a streak, you can win many times, you lose only once. He goes, "Oh, no, red's coming in." So this wheel goes round, it comes in black. He's like, "Oh, I know red's coming in this time." Plops another 50 down. Now, this went on for a good half hour, where black had actually come in 14 straight times, or actually 15 straight times, I believe it was. So now he's down to have lost $500. He's like, "I know it this time. Red's coming in." He put the $50 on red, and guess what? Red came in. He points his finger at me, says, "See, told you so. Red's coming in. Got it." I go, "Good hit, my friend." All he had done was lost $500 to prove the point that red would eventually come in. But when you play on a streak, you can win many times. You lose only once. When you play against a streak, you can lose many times, but you only win once. And is it really worth saying you were right to predict when a streak ends, or just play on the streak until it does end? And I bring that up because this first game here, Missouri and North Texas, Missouri, you look at the numbers here, they're actually 2-3 straight up. They've lost not only 5 straight games this year, but they did not cover against Arkansas. They did not cover against Georgia. They did not cover against Mississippi State. The streak is 8 for Missouri. So let's ride this streak. And I tell you what, if Missouri doesn't cover this week against North Texas, you'd be doggone right to say that next week I'm going to have Texas A&M over Missouri. And if they don't cover that game, I'm going to put up Vanderbilt over Missouri. We'll see until Missouri actually covers a game against the spread. But there's more to it than that. There's more to it than just saying Missouri has lost 8 straight games against the spread. Let's ride a streak, although that is a pretty good thing to go with. But let's take a look at the situation. Missouri is in a SEC sandwich. They have just played Tennessee last week. They've got Texas A&M next week, and this is a little bit of a sandwich game. Plus, they've got to put some effort into these SEC games. They've opened up the year 0-2 in SEC play so far. Meanwhile, North Texas, fresh off a bye. So you have a team that's fresh off a bye, all ready to play the SEC team. And does North Texas get fired up for the SEC? Well, here's an interesting stat for you. Seth Luttrell, the head coach of North Texas, has covered his last 4 games playing Power 5 opponents. Now, you'd have to look in your magazine for the spreads, or you can actually, let's go take a look here, actually. Let's go to last 40 years results and take a look at these last 4 games against the spread. Now, last year they did not play a Power 5 team. They played California. They were plus 14. They only lost by 6, so that's one win. Let's see if we've got some more here. At Arkansas, plus 6. They went outright, 44-17. Led that thing 34-10 at the half. Wow. All right, let's go back a little more. At Iowa, they were plus 21.5, lost by 17. That's a cover. And at Florida, they lost 32-0, but they were plus 36. So the last 4 times Seth Luttrell has faced, and you can see right here, Seth Luttrell's been the head coach since 2016. I love this, too. It tells you who the coaches are. This is all available under the last 40 years section. Corky Nelson, guess what? I did not know Corky Nelson was ever the head coach of North Texas. I got to admit, back when they were in 1AA in 1989, I was not following North Texas, so I never heard of Corky Nelson, but you have now. I did follow the Daryl Dickey era, which had some good years, these 8-5, 9-4, 7-5. Todd Dodge, a little bit of a disastrous 4 years. Dan McCarney had him in this 9-4 year. Here, McCarney got fired mid-season. Canales took over, and now it's been the Seth Luttrell era. So you can actually go all the way back. And here, North Texas isn't a great one to show you. Let's do it with Missouri. For Missouri, you can go all the way back to 1976 with the spreads. You want to know a spread on any game since 1976, it's here on Phil Steele Plus. Plus, right here, in 2003, we started covering the over-unders. Back in 1998, they didn't have over-unders. I think in 99, they started putting them on a few marquee games. They experimented with that with a few years. Here, they put them on every game, and that's when we started charting them. They put them on almost every game. As you see right here, they didn't put them on Ball State, Eastern Illinois, or Middle Tennessee. But now we got totals on every game and then halftimes on every game since 2004. We'll show you some halftimes as we go along, but I find halftimes to be invaluable when you're going through these games. So now we got numerous things in our favor here, and here's my favorite. You guys know I love a red-green matchup, right? I'm all for red-green matchups. And the thing about Phil Steele Plus, you become an instant expert on every team just by looking at the team pages. Look at Missouri's rush defense. I don't have to tell you they have a bad rush defense. You just look for the red. Okay, this is an area of concern. They're giving up 307 yards per game, 6.5 yards per carry. Now, you may perceive North Texas as a passing team, but Seth Luttrell likes to run the football. Look at this green last year. They ran the football well, 230 yards per game. They're running for 207 yards per game here. They're at their best when they can run the ball. Here's a 345-yard game. They win. Louisiana Tech, they ran the ball for 241. They covered that. They did not cover against UAB. They did not cover against SMU, 2 games where they didn't run the ball. I think they'll be able to run the ball here. Missouri's given up 307. In fact, they fired their defensive line coach after the loss to Tennessee. So we got a red-green matchup. We got a streak. We got the fact that Luttrell does well against Power 5. We got a situation. North Texas off a bye versus Missouri in an SEC sandwich. We're playing it. We're going to take North Texas plus the points over Missouri. And North Texas right now is plus 19. So we're going to take North Texas plus 19 over Missouri as your first play this week. Let's get to your second play this week. And it's going to involve the MAC teams. And, I told you last week, College Sports Now puts out a podcast. Stephen Hartzell, Wayne Cook. We do it every Wednesday morning, and you really should check that out. I tweet it out on philsteele.com or on my Twitter account at philsteele042, and they put up a lot of good information. But there are weeks where I give them my MAC play of the week, and last week was the first MAC play of the week. We doubled it on here, put it on here. It was Miami of Ohio. I told you how they lay down in non-conference games and all of a sudden start playing when it's MAC play. They beat Central Michigan last week, despite the fact that Miami of Ohio lost their starting quarterback in the second quarter of that game. If you go look at the player stats here, Gabbert hit 12 of 20 for 171, then went out, but thank goodness A.J. Myers got plenty of experience. And here's something, too. You've got individual stats, not just this year, but you can go back every year and look at the individual stats in every game. So A.J. Myers, you see, actually played last year against Ball State, threw for 212 yards, played against Buffalo. The year before that, did A.J. Meyer play? He did not see any action there, so let's see if we got him here. Nope. But Myers had action, and you can go back in 19, take a look at Brett Gabbert, the season he had. Best games, worst games. Look at this: 5 of 15 against Ohio State. And then you could look for the best game of the year. If you're a fantasy football player, you'll love these stats, and they're on every single team that we have. Even FCS teams have individual stats. We'll get into that when I get to the FCS. But anyway, this week I honed in on the Kent State Buffalo game as my MAC play on the podcast that I do with Hartzell and Cook, College Sports Now. Check it out every Wednesday. But let's take a look here, and we are going to put on the MAC. Kent State's at home. We're going to put them on the right, and we're going to put Buffalo on the left. Now, I want to point out a couple things about this. If you go back to this Maryland game for Kent State, they only put up 16 points. A frustrating game. I put it out as a totals play. You could see here in the drives. And by the way, thank you once again to collegepressbox.com. Great website. They allow me to post the box scores on my website. I don't come up with these box scores. collegepressbox.com does. But I actually go through the play-by-play of every single game every single week. Yeah, that's all I do is football. Sorry. But as you see, you could get the play-by-play of every game. You could see what the stats were after the first quarter. You could see what the stats were in the second quarter. These are available on every game. So let's go back to this Kent State-Maryland game. And it was a frustrating game for Kent because Kent settled for a field goal. Kent fumbled at the Maryland 20-yard line. Kent settled for a field goal. Kent got stopped on downs at the Maryland 40-yard line. Kent got stopped on downs at the Maryland 9-yard line. Kent got stopped on downs at the Maryland 24-yard line. Could have put a lot more. And Kent got stopped on downs at the Maryland 34-yard line again. Could have put a lot more points on the board. They had 458 yards, only came up with 16 points. Definitely a disappointing, frustrating loss for the totals play I put on. Actually, did I put that on press box or on here? I think I put it on press box. But it was disappointing. And so Kent did that. And last week they settled for a couple more field goals against Bowling Green. They did have 396 yards. I think it was a flat spot. I think they looked past Bowling Green. This was a Bowling Green team they beat last year, 62-24, put up 667 yards. Bowling Green did have a couple of drives go their way. I think they had let's go through the play-by-play. Well, I'm not going to go through the individual play-by-play on every single game, but anyway, I thought Kent played probably a little better than the final score would indicate last week, but it was a game they looked past. But Buffalo, meanwhile, when you look at their game against Western Michigan blew so many opportunities in this game against Buffalo. Come over here. Western Michigan misses a field goal from the Buffalo 20. Stopped on downs at the Buffalo 18. Misses a field goal at the Buffalo 26. Stopped on downs at the 36. All that going on. And at the end of the game, Buffalo, down by 14, drives 65 yards in 7 plays for a touchdown with 1:17 left for the backdoor push. You look at the halftime, Western Michigan had a 229 to 153 yard edge. You look at the game, Western Michigan had a 457 to 282 yard edge. Dominated the game. First downs, 29 to 15. It just messed up in the red zone. It really cost them in that game to only win by 7. But that was a misleading final last week. Now we'll take a look at the series history. And I want to remind you, when you click on the opponent, you get the last 24 years matchups right at your fingertips. And you will see here that that's 2017. Let me see why that's there. Let's go over here to this one against Western Michigan. Kent State. Oh, why am I clicking on Kent State, Western Michigan? It's Kent State, Buffalo, for crying out loud. All right, there you go. The last 3 meetings, the home team has won all 3. So the home team is 3-0 straight up, 3-0 ATS. They lost at Buffalo by 34. They beat Buffalo, and last year they lost 70-41. And I want to point this out about that game. And this might be something that drives Kent a little bit. Let's go to this Kent-Buffalo game. Look at the end of the game. Here it is, 1:16 left in the game. Buffalo is up 63-41. They go and tack on another touchdown. Now, would that annoy you a little bit when you're looking at the films this year if you're Kent State? You want to talk about playing with revenge? I'm playing with revenge if a team tacks on a touchdown up 63-41 on me last year. So I think that's a big thing. Kent's played a much tougher schedule. Buffalo is taking on the number 101 schedule. Yeah, they played Nebraska. All right. Look who Kent's played. They played Texas A&M in College Station when Texas A&M had Haynes King. And by the way, look at this. It's 10-3 at the half. They played Iowa, a top 5 team on the road. By the way, look at this. It's 16-7 at the half. They played a Big Ten team in Maryland who, as mentioned, they actually out first down them 27-23. Just blew too many opportunities to score and came up short 37-16. So they played the much tougher schedule than Buffalo has. So playing Buffalo's the 4th toughest opponent they've played all year. I would say Kent State is the 3rd toughest opponent Buffalo has played. So here's the other factor I want to point out to you, and it's pass defense. Now, if you go to philsteele.com, once again, the purpose of this, show you how to use the site to its fullest. Let's go to the main page. Click here under FBS Info. FBS Info, we can go to pass efficiency defense. And actually, I should have had Kent up here so we could see who their opponents are. Kent State this year has played Texas A&M. Texas A&M has a number 14 pass D. They have played Iowa. Iowa has the number 3 rated pass D. They have played Maryland. Maryland actually has the number 30 rated pass D. And here's a surprising thing that I found out. Bowling Green. Bowling Green's got the number 5 pass D. They have a 1-5 ratio they're allowing this year, 53%. Did you know Bowling Green was playing good pass defense? You would if you'll check this out, the pass efficiency defense. All right, so they have played the number 3, the number 5, the number 14, and the number 30 pass defenses. Kent State's a passing team. Let's take a look where Buffalo is. Buffalo's way down here. Buffalo's number 114. They're allowing an 8-2 ratio, 62% completions. You can throw the ball on Buffalo. Kent has faced some evil pass defenses so far. I think Kent lights it up this week throwing the football. Buffalo's off a misleading final. Let's see what the average game grades say about this game. Once again, I'll put Kent on the right because they're the home team. Put Buffalo on the left. Average game grades is close, but I think a lot of that has to do with the opponents they've been playing. So add it all up. You got Kent State. I believe they're laying 5.5. Let me double check the latest line on that. I should have checked these before I posted this thing. We got Kent State minus 5.5 against Buffalo, and that is your second official play. So Kent State minus 5.5 over Buffalo. All right, let's take a break from the FBS. We'll get back to them. I got 4 more FBS versus FBS games for you. But let's go check out the FCS, see how that's doing. And I got 2 games lined up for you this week. And you know what I do, guys, on my Thursday nights, I line up my power ratings. I got 6 different sets of power ratings on every game. And then I go through and I look for games that the power ratings are lined up on. You see this Delaware one, you see the South Carolina State one, the power ratings like both those 2 teams. And then I go through and I start to analyze it. I pull up my pages. I'm not an expert on the FCS, but you know what? When I click on Phil Steele Plus and look in the FCS, yeah, I would say I'm an expert on the FCS. I know more than the average person. Let's take a look at South Carolina State over here, and they're playing Florida A&M. I was a little surprised Florida A&M is a 14-point favorite in this game. Now, if you look at the records, Florida A&M's 2-2, coming off a nice big win. These guys are just 1-3. You'd say, okay, I can see it. But look at the average game grades. Florida A&M's only playing to an average game grade of 60. South Carolina State's playing to an average game grade of 68.7. So the average game grades actually say South Carolina State wins this game. Let's look at a little bit of series history here. If you look at the forecast, it gives you a complete breakdown who South Carolina State is. Buddy Powell has been the head coach there at South Carolina State. He's got a .645 winning percentage, does a great job. Reason they're 1-3, part of it has to do with playing 3 road games at Alabama A&M, a tough 1-point loss. They played Clemson. Of course, they're going to lose to Clemson. And New Mexico State's an underrated team this year. Keep your eyes on New Mexico State. They lost that one. So they're 1-3. They beat Bethune-Cookman last week. But if you go back and look, and I'm not going to have this be long, but if you go to ESPN.com and you're following the South Carolina State game last week, do you know they led that thing 42-7 in the fourth quarter? Bethune-Cookman got 4 garbage touchdowns in the fourth quarter, went down 42-7. So these stats are a little skewed here. They're actually better than the stats would indicate. I like South Carolina State. That was a much bigger win, is what I'm trying to say. So now let's take a look at a couple other factors. Let's take a look at Florida A&M. Here's the thing with Florida A&M. They've got a pretty good head coach, too, in Willie Simmons. But guess what? They didn't even play last year. That's right. So here's 2019. They took last year off. I don't think teams are going to be as good taking off the entire year last year like they did. They lost to Jackson State in the opener. They did beat Fort Valley State. Fort Valley State's not very good. They lost to USF by 21, and they beat Alabama State last week. Their offense lost their starting quarterback. As you can see, Ryan Stanley last year had a 23-7 ratio. He's gone. So now, and by the way, over here, Corey Fields played last year. He is back. Corey Fields was the quarterback in 19, quarterback in the spring. He's back. So they have an experienced quarterback. They do not. Rashawn McKay is their QB right now. They're only putting up 327 yards per game. Meanwhile, South Carolina State's putting up 424 yards per game. But you can look at the series history on Phil Steele Plus. Let's go do that. Now, naturally, Florida A&M didn't play in the spring. South Carolina State did, and they went 3-1. Over here, South Carolina State lost to Florida A&M, but they only lost by 4. I want you to note that. All right, so now they play Florida A&M the year before. They beat them 44-21. Played Florida A&M the year before. Did they? They didn't play that year. Okay, let's go back to 16. Played Florida A&M, beat them 48-14. Played Florida A&M, beat them 36-0. Played Florida A&M, beat them 34-17. Played Florida A&M, beat them 25-21. Played Florida A&M, beat them 27-20. Played Florida A&M, lost 27-24, but that's only by 3. And here, what was the final score? 2010, final score, Florida A&M. They won 19-0. So let's go back to 2009. They beat them 35-20. They beat them 28-21. They beat them 49-14. They beat them 28-21. All right, so back to 2006. Florida A&M hasn't lost two. They've only lost 2 games South Carolina State's only lost 2 games to Florida A&M since 2006, and the biggest loss was 4. Florida A&M didn't play last year. They're laying 14 points here, and this is South Carolina State team that led Bethune-Cookman 42-7 last week. I'm going to go with Bethune-Cookman plus the 14 points. South Carolina State. See, I get a little confused there at times. I'm going to go with South Carolina State plus the 14 points. They have only lost twice since 2006 to Florida A&M, and the biggest loss is 4 points. And they're playing to a better average game grade, and they're getting 2 touchdowns. I'm taking South Carolina State plus 14 over Florida A&M. All right, let's go take a look at another matchup and in the FCS, and it's going to be Delaware against Rhode Island. Now, when you click here, if you want to know how these teams were picked in the preseason or anything like that, just click right here. James Madison's favored to win the CAA. The CAA is one of the better divisions in college football. Look at this. The preseason quarterback of the CAA, Nolan Henderson of Delaware. I like that. First team preseason. Dejon Lee at running back, first team preseason. A wide receiver in Pitts, number 1 preseason. I like that. Delaware was picked 2nd in the poll. They did draw 7 first-place votes. Rhode Island was picked 6th in the poll. Now, the polls are not everything. I know that. So let's take a look at the individual matchups here. We're going to put Delaware on the left. They're getting 3.5 points here from Rhode Island this week. And we're going to put Rhode Island on the right. So the first thing I did last night, after I came up with my 10 games where the numbers did, is I looked at what we wrote on the forecast. I wrote this forecast, and I remember writing here that Rhode Island had their first winning season in 17 years, and that was back in 2018. So let's go back to 2018, see what a big winning year that was. They went 6-5. That was their first winning season in 17 years. Then they had another losing season in 19, and last year they actually went 2-1. But look at this. They were minus 111 yards per game in conference play. So this is not a team that's done well in the past. You'll recognize this name, Kasim Hill. He played for Maryland. Do you remember that? He is a VHT. He played for Maryland. Good quarterback. I think he led the win over Texas a couple years ago. So they do have a good quarterback. And they are 4-0. Now, they haven't played a murderer's row here. Bryant, Albany, Brown, and Stony Brook, not a murderer's row. but they are plus 60 yards per game, and they are 4-0. I think it's because they played a soft schedule. This will be the first real opponent they play this year. Meanwhile, Delaware, last year, remember what I just talked about in the spring? These guys went 2-1, but they were minus 111 yards per game. Delaware last year, in the spring, beat Maine, Stony Brook, Rhode Island. They beat Rhode Island 35-21. Look at the stats. 551 to 221. They out first downed them 27-11. So they dominated Rhode Island, and that was at Rhode Island, where this game is, by the way. Look how Delaware did on the road. They beat Rhode Island, beat Delaware State, beat Villanova, beat Jacksonville State in the playoffs, and their lone loss was to South Dakota State, the team that was the number 1 seed in the playoffs. So last year they were 7-1. Their lone loss came in the playoffs when they lost to the number 1 seed, 33-3. This is a doggone good Delaware team, one that outgained their opponents by 103 yards per game. Now, this year they lost, but their loss was to Rutgers, for crying out loud. They beat Maine, they beat St. Francis, and both teams played Albany. If you look, Rhode Island was outgained by 27 yards. Delaware outgained Albany by 52. Now, the average game grade, not overwhelming in Delaware's favor, but they're playing at a 71.7 level. These guys are playing at a 68.4 level. I'm not giving Rhode Island a 3-point home edge because Delaware does so well on the road. We see how well they played on the road here. And Rhode Island has not been an overwhelming home team. Last year in the spring, they had one home game and lost to Delaware. They lost to Delaware. They lost to Stony Brook. They lost to Elon. They lost to James Madison. So they have a lot of losses at home. So it's not an overwhelming home team. I think Delaware should be the favorite in this game. Delaware's getting 3.5 points. I'm going to take Delaware plus 3.5 over a Rhode Island team that's had 2 winning seasons in 19 years. One of them was 6-5, and one of them was 2-11, where they're outgained by 111 yards per game. All right, let's get back to the FBS. And once again, you just click on here, FBS team pages. They pop up for you. They're in conference order. You should know your conferences. And we're going to start out with Wyoming against Air Force. And we're going to put Air Force on the right because they're the home team. We're going to put Wyoming on the left because they're the visitor. And a couple things I want to point out here. Now, Wyoming's not playing to a great average game grade right now. In fact, Air Force playing to a better average game grade. And I see why Air Force is a 5-point favorite in this game. But I like the matchups here. And also I want to point out, if you go back and look at this Northern Illinois game, a game Wyoming won by 7, their problem was they took the foot off the gas pedal. They led that thing 42-16, took the foot off the gas pedal, and as it was, they needed to score a touchdown with 1:31 left or 1:35 left just to pull out the win. Once again, thank you to collegepressbox.com for letting us have these box scores on our website. Air Force, meanwhile, has done well this year. They beat FAU. They have played extremely well. They shut down Navy, as you would expect. Battle of option versus option. You know I talk about that all the time. But here's what I like about Wyoming in this game. Wyoming knows how to play Air Force. Look at this over here. If this color here, this column is the score of the game, if this is green, that means they won the game. So you can tell at a glance that Wyoming's won 5 of the last 7 games. Look how many Wyoming's covered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They had covered 10 in a row in this series. And the reason is they play the option well. Now, I see red numbers over here, but you're always going to have red numbers over there. Red numbers is anything over 200 yards rushing. Naturally, Air Force is going to get over 200 yards rushing, although Wyoming held them to under 200 yards rushing here 1, 2, 3 times in the last 7 years. In fact, in the last 6 years, Wyoming has held Air Force to 221 yards rushing. They averaged 309 yards versus all the other teams they played. So that's almost 100 yards below their season average. Now, out here, you see if there's an upset in the series. A green upset means that Wyoming won it. Now, I'll show you here on the Air Force side. The Air Force side would have these in red, meaning the Air Force was upset. This means Wyoming pulled the upset. So Wyoming's got 4 upsets in the last 9 years, which I like. They had covered 10 in a row until their last meeting. Their last meeting was in what year? 2019. So let's take a look at that 2019 box score and just show you one thing about Air Force's cover here. Air Force got a 75-yard TD pass with 2 minutes left. They're protecting a 13-6 lead. Wyoming is plus 11. They're going to cover again. Wyoming is playing the run. They want to get the ball back and try to score. Air Force surprised them with a pass, 75-yard touchdown pass with 2:04 left, and that's how Air Force covered. That's their lone cover in the last 11 years. So Wyoming plays well in that respect. And then the big factor, in my mind, is the bye. If you have a bye the week before playing the option, the reason the option is so effective, I talk about it all the time, teams are tough to prepare for it, but if you have a bye the week before, then you can prepare for it better. And if you go back and take a look at it, they've done, Wyoming has had a bye last week. Had a bye last week prior to playing Air Force, and they've done extremely well. I showed you that already. I'm not going to show it to you again. But they've done extremely well holding the Air Force option down. They're off a bye week. They dominate the series history. They had won 10 in a row against the spread until that 75-yard TD pass. We're going to take Wyoming off a bye against the option as +5 against Air Force as your fifth play. Let's move on to number 6, and we're going to take a look at ULM against Georgia State. And what you have here, you have a 2-2 ULM against a 1-3 or 1-4 Georgia State. How is Georgia State favored by 16? Well, you guys probably know. You're not watching this unless you're a football fan. You're a football fan. You know ULM's not a good team. They did beat Jackson State 12-7, and I cannot, for the life of me, explain ULM against Troy. How did that happen? I don't know. I've gone back and looked at the play-by-play. That's one where when the season's over, I don't bother the coaches during the season, but when I'm going through spring or after spring practice with the coaches, I'm going to ask Coach Bowden, and I'm also going to ask Troy's coach. I'm going to say, hey, what the heck happened in that game? Because I can't not fathom what happened in this 29-16 win. Anyway, in that game, ULM's quarterback, Rhett Rodriguez, got injured. I don't think he's going to play this week either. Excuse me, I had to take a little drink there. So Chandler Rogers and Kobe Suits handled the quarterback duties last week, struggled. They got blown out by Coastal Carolina. They're down their quarterback. They're not a very good team. They average 208 yards per game. 208, guys. That's their total offense per game. Give up 444. We take a look at Georgia State. Now, Georgia State's a team. The thing I've learned watching them is when they get down, they tend to end up getting beat. Sometimes bad. But if they're in a game, then they can put the hammer down. They covered against Charlotte here, 20-9, and they even took Auburn to the wire. Now you're saying, hey, that's a 10-point loss. That's not a close game. I beg to differ. 45 seconds left in the game. Georgia State's up 24-19. They are beating Auburn in Jordan-Hare. It's 4th and 7. And backup quarterback T.J. Finley, who came in because Bo Nix was ineffective. You saw Bo Nix against LSU last week. Bo Nix was ineffective against this Georgia State defense. So Finley leads the comeback. 4th and 7. He's almost sacked. Throws end zone 10-yard touchdown pass. And then 14 seconds later, they had the 36-yard interception return for a touchdown. That very easily could have been a Georgia State win there. They'd be 2-3. They did lose to App State. They got down. I don't think ULM's going to get up on Georgia State. They only average 208 yards per game, and they're not a very good team. Their power rating 68.7. They're at 87.9. Georgia State is -16 in this one, but I think they've played a much tougher schedule. Look at this. North Carolina, and that was North Carolina off a loss. They played Army, and they played Auburn, and they played App State, the best team in the Sun Belt. So they played that type of schedule. They did play Coastal and Kentucky, but they have not played a schedule near what Georgia State has played this year. Plus, ULM is not great at home. They're 8-19-1 against the spread. Go ahead and look that up in your magazine. And last year when these two played, look at the halftime score. Georgia State against ULM, 42-14 at the half. 42-14. So I think they're capable of going into UL Monroe and covering the 16. Frankly, I was a little surprised the number wasn't 21 or higher. I'm going to take Georgia State -16 against UL Monroe. 2 more games, and we're going to go with 2 underdogs here to finish it off. And we're going to start off with LSU against Kentucky. And a couple things I want to point out about this. Now, I always like to go against teams off a big upset win. I also like to go against teams that were favored and lost and play well off a loss. Okay, this one fits that criteria, but I got some real good numbers on that to even back it up more. In fact, I've got a lot of good numbers on this game. First of all, it's a must-win for LSU. They lose to Kentucky. I looked at the line for next week. They're already a 4-point home dog to Florida. Then they have to play at Mississippi, at Alabama, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. They lose this game to Kentucky, Ed Orgeron's probably gone. Kentucky or LSU is probably finishing the year 4-8. It's going to be a miserable year. It's almost a backs to the wall, absolute must-win game for LSU. Now, I mentioned they were off a loss. How about Ed Orgeron and LSU 10-4 against the spread off a straight-up loss? 10-4 against the spread. They bounced back big. Here they lost to UCLA, cover against McNeese. Last year they lost to Mississippi State. They beat Vandy. They lost to Missouri. They beat South Carolina big. They lost to Auburn. They beat Arkansas. They were only a 2.5-point favorite in that game, believe it or not. They did lose to Bama, but then they upset Florida. So look at that. They do extremely well off a loss. Now, if you look at Kentucky off an upset win, they are 2-8 against the spread. Go ahead, look in your magazine. Bold means they won the game. Look for bold when they're a dog and see what they did the next week. You'll see Kentucky's just 2-8 against the spread off an upset win. So you have a team off an upset win that's 2-8. LSU's 10-4 off a loss. But there's more. Stoops is doing an incredible job here. Mark Stoops doing an incredible job at Kentucky. But when they play Western teams, not named Mississippi State's their annual crossover, they're just 1-9 straight up. Well, this is one of those teams. And how about LSU against the East? LSU is 10-3 against the East. And here's the kicker. LSU's a 3.5-point favorite in this game. Let's go take a look at the series history. How many times Kentucky been favored? You do not see a minus sign here. So they were a dog. Last time they were favored over LSU was 1999. So this millennium, they have not been favored over LSU. Kentucky's a 3.5-point favorite. I'm going to take LSU plus 3.5 over Kentucky as the play this week, as their seventh play this week. LSU plus 3.5. All right, let's wrap it up. And then I got some quick hitters for you, things you might want to know about this week's games. I'll wrap it up with that. Let's take a look at Old Dominion against Marshall. Marshall's at home, so we're going to put them on the right and Middle's on the left. I'm going to ask you a quick question before I show you both teams' stats. Who has a better defense? All right, I believe 9 out of 10 of you just answered Marshall. Of course, has a better defense than Old Dominion. Let's take a closer look at that. Old Dominion is allowing 319 yards per game. They're holding opponents to 79 yards per game below their season average. And no, that does not include the Hampton game. This 79 is just for the FBS games. They held Wake Forest to 352 yards, a season low. They held Hampton to a season low. They held UTEP to a season low. How about Marshall? They're allowing opponents 93 yards above their season average, 405 yards per game. Look at the red over here. You don't even see any red under Old Dominion. You see green, but you don't see red. Shocking. And this, once again, they're allowing 93 above their season average. The only team they held to a season low is NC Central. App State got their best of the season. East Carolina got their best of the season. Navy got close to their best of the season against them. Old Dominion has a better defense, and they're getting 21. That was surprising to me when I went through the stats. Here's another one to look at. I'm a stat guy. If I generally see a team at a 493 to 314 yard edge and lost, I'm like, that's a misleading final. They probably should have won that game. But let's take a little bit closer. When I'm going through the play-by-play, that was my original assessment on the game. I'm like, wow, Middle got lucky to win that game because they were outgained by that amount of yards. But when you go through the play-by-play and you're looking at it into the fourth quarter, we see that in the fourth quarter, Marshall actually had a 14-1 first down edge, and they had a 216 to 18 yard edge, and they outscored Middle Tennessee 14-0. In fact, if you go back up to the top, this game is 34-14, and at that point, Middle had the yardage edge, 296 to 277, and they led the game by 20 points. Marshall got this touchdown, and then Marshall went 97 yards in 12 plays for a touchdown with 112 left to pull within 6. So Middle was nothing fluky. They led that game by 20 and had the yardage edge. Marshall did it all in the fourth quarter. So I'm saying when you look at those stats in the future, don't think that was a misleading one. Here's a couple more kickers for you. Old Dominion playing to an average game grade of 87.3. Marshall playing to an average game grade of 99.6. That says Marshall should be favored by about 15. They're a 21-point favorite. And the final one, go and look in your magazine. Look at every time Marshall's been favored by 14 or more, 14 plus, 14 and a half plus points. It has to be 14 and a half plus. All right, you went back and looked. 2-9 against the spread. So Marshall's a poor big favorite. Old Dominion has the better defense. Marshall's off a misleading stat game last week when they were down by 20 in the fourth quarter, and the average game grades chime in. Add it all up, I'm taking Old Dominion plus 21 over Marshall. All right, let's get to some quick hitters for you. SMU Navy. As you guys know, I've used SMU Navy quite a few times as an over. I've used it either on Phil Steele Plus or Inside the Press Box. And by the way, if you're an Inside the Press Box subscriber, I am still bitter over the fact that for the season, Inside the Press Box is below 500. That bothers me to no end. I know that Phil Steele Plus is doing great. Believe me, everything I have is that by the end of the year, we're well above the 500 line with Inside the Press Box. So we should have a really good rest of October and a really good November and a really good bowl season for Inside the Press Box. All I work on is football, and believe me, it bothers me to no end to see that Inside the Press Box right now under 500 on the season, despite the fact that Phil Steele Plus Tour hitting the 6-1. Basically, these are the games I threw out. My best games are on Inside the Press Box. So I just thought I'd mention that. But let's take a look at SMU Navy. The one thing I want to point out here, the total is surprisingly just 55.5. That surprises me because every time I think SMU Navy, you have a Navy team that doesn't defend the pass very well. You have an SMU team that struggles against the Navy option. Look at how Navy's done here. Navy's rush for, look at this red. This is what SMU allows the Navy. Tons of yards, 5.2, 4.5, 7.8, 10.3, 6.2. You add these together, Navy's averaging over 6 yards a carry on the ground. Meanwhile, Smooth throws the ball at will on Navy. Their scores have been 88, 63, 61, 83, 106, 69. So in the last 6 years, all 6 games have had more than 55.5 points. I'd like to thank Todd for putting in the over-unders this year. You can see it's 5-1 to the over, but that one under was a total of 67, not 55.5. So you might want to look at SMU Navy over the total. Another total to look at, and this goes back. Actually, I'm going to wrap it up with that. We started with streaks, we'll end with streaks. I want to point out that Bowling Green has not been a double-digit favorite since 2016. I could go back and show you, but I'll cut down some time. Look it up in your magazine. It's right there. Not a double-digit favorite since 2016. How about Ohio University? They're a home dog this week. Look it up. You'll see 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Haven't been a home dog since 2017. I find that interesting. The last time UTEP was a conference away favorite, how about 2012? That's a long time. That's 9 years. Actually, it's 10 years that they have not been a conference favorite. All right, I told you we started with the streak. We'll wrap it up with a streak. Let's take a look at Washington State and Oregon. And we're going to click on, let's go with Washington State, the home team. I could click on Oregon State here. I'm not going to go through the matchup itself. What I am going to go through is I'm going to take a look at the last 24 years. And once again, you just click right here, and you get the last 24 years at your fingertips. And bring your eyes. Well, first of all, look at this. Washington State's won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 in a row. They're a dog this week at home. You might want to think about that. But this is what I'm really interested in over here. Over. 8 straight overs. And how about this? Those 8 straight overs have averaged 78 points per game. Now, in this era where points are plentiful, most spreads are 60s, 70s when it gets to this type of level. The spread on this game is 59. So you might want to look at that. We started with the streak. We ended with the streak. But 8 official plays this week. 6-1 for the college plays last week. You know, I did not show you the NFL this week. I didn't see a game that I felt was worthy of comparisons. I've showed you the NFL site before where we give you the best team right now appears to be the if you take a look here on the homepage, they've got the strength of wins, pain of losses, which I find it adds in the I just want to show you one thing real quick. For every team you defeat, you get their wins. For every team you lose to, you get their losses. The Chargers were up here at 7, Dallas at 7. The Rams win last night was over Seattle, so they get all Seattle's wins. they'll be up there as well. But that's all available. We've got tons of stuff on the NFL. It takes you back the last 10 years. It's got all that stuff there. I've showed that before. But that'll do it for this week's. Let's hope we have another big winning week here on Phil Steele Plus. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time to watch this week's video.